Well, hello, good day, and welcome back once again, viewers. Thanks for joining us here today. Episode number 4. The time is flying by quickly here on the Mental Health Show, and some great topics that we'll be talking about again today. Starting off with, we'll be talking about, infant mental health. Really? Is that a thing? Do we think of infants when we think of mental health? Probably not as much as we should. We're going to have one of our experts here talking about that today. And emotion regulation. What is that? That's why we bring the experts here. And from St. Clair Child Youth Services today, Virginia, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And Tina, thank you as well for joining today.
Thank you.
Virginia, let's start with you. Tell everybody, who you are and what your role is at St. Clair Child Youth Services.
Sure. So my name is Virginia Allan. I'm the director, one of the directors at St. Clair Child and Youth Services, which is our Children's Mental Health Center for services for kids, as you know, from birth right up to 18. And I oversee a number of teams in the early years. So our infant development team, we have a 0 to 6, birth to 6 mental health team. And we also run the early on. Some families may be familiar with the drop-in early on sites. We run the one at Lockheil as well.
Okay, very good. And Tina, same thing. What's your role here?
I'm a children's mental health counselor at St. Clair Child Youth Services. Been there for about 18 years. So over those years, I've been working primarily with children 6 to 18 at the agency. I do a lot of groups, like one-on-one workshops. So a little bit of different things from day to day, including our walking clinic, which right now is our TCC. Yeah.
Right. Very good. So as I said, folks, we've got the experts in the topics that we're going to be sharing with you today. We would invite you to ask your question or share your comments during the broadcast here today. And our experts or someone will do their best at some point to respond to those. We want to make sure you're getting value out of the mental health show. And this show is for all of you. And we want to make sure that we're bringing you all the topics that you'd like to hear about as well. So if there's a topic that we haven't covered here, make sure that you're letting us know that as well. So we're going to say goodbye to Tina for now. Stand by, Tina. We'll come back to you in a little bit. And right now we're going to start off with Virginia. And again, thanks for being here today. I know this is important. I have to admit, when I was looking at this in the beginning, I was, wow, that's a topic, infant mental health.
Right.
What is infant mental health?
Right. I think your reaction's not unusual. Before I sort of tell you kind of a definition or a way to think about it, let me just say that I think that that's so common that people sometimes they can't imagine an infant, a newborn baby, or a toddler, or even a 3 or 4 year old. What kinds of possible mental health difficulties could they have? So it kind of is almost like it's hard to imagine that a child could have those kinds of difficulties when they're so new in this world, this little human. So I think some parts of our brain sometimes just can't even fathom how that could possibly be. But I hope, through talking today, everybody will have a little bit better sense of it. I'm excited that you've included this in the mental health show because it often gets overlooked for issues with older kids, which are also really important. But many times the issues with older kids are connected to things that happen early on in our lives. So knowing about that help. If we know better, we can take advantage of those opportunities to do better with our kids. Right. So infant mental health, sorry.
Go ahead, yeah.
So infant mental health is really, some people call it the social emotional development, the growing capacity of a child from birth to about 5 or 6 to form very close, secure relationships, to manage and experience the range of their emotions. And anyone who's had a toddler knows that you often see those on display, that range of emotions. People often talk about tantrums and so on in that age group. That's normal and expected and needed. And then also to be able to explore the environment in a safe way because they've got secure relationships in their lives that help support them and tether them so that they can then go out and experience the world in a safe way.
Okay. Now you've sort of touched on it a little bit, but like how do infants or young children have these mental health issues? I mean, I know I think of, especially an infant, that I'm still kind of going, do we just think the infants aren't there, they're quiet, or maybe they're just screaming when they're hungry? So what else is really going on there?
Yeah, maybe to answer that question, a way of looking at it is to understand what's going on a little bit. So what we know is that I'm going to give you a statistic that'll probably be surprising to many people, but recently, within the last couple of years, Harvard Center for the Developing Child did research. They had previously been thinking about 700 neural connections are made in our babies' brains after they're born, and in those first few months, there's these connections that are happening within the brain, the neural connections that are helping wire together the brain in a way that prepares it, much like the foundation of a house, prepares it for the later building. So that's all happening really early on. And what we know is that when there's disruptions in that happening, or when children don't have constant, regular, predictable responses to when they're crying, when they have needs, then some of that brain architecture changes, and it changes our brain for the rest of our life. Not that the brain can't be changed. We know it's very malleable, but this is the really key time in infants' lives. So infant issues can happen when things go awry between the caregiver and the infant in terms of understanding what the child is needing and being able to be responded to, and things that happen, kids that witness or are a part of situations that are traumatic for families or for the children. So there's a real range, and sometimes it can be because of what's going on for the mother at the time, during the pregnancy and after, in terms of her own issues going on, maybe mental health issues or struggles or stressors. We now know that newborn baby has been affected by that and is affected by it. So when we know about that, we can help moms and jump in with families where it's needed very early on to help support getting that back on track for them.
Okay. Well, I think this next question you would think would be some obvious answers to. But so give us that. Why is it so important to know about infant mental health? Again, the obvious, but let's dig a little deeper into that.
So a couple of things. Let me start with the fact that when there is positive, I'll call it positive mental health in kids, in infants and children really young, it increases the likelihood statistically, and I don't have that stat just at top of my head, but it's statistically significant in terms of how it affects the trajectory for how the child will do in terms of being ready for school success, for later relationships in their life with other people. And even now, long-term studies are showing it to be connected with long-term health. So this is an unprecedented, a very unprecedented time of remarkable growth that doesn't happen at any other time in a human's life. And if you think of a tree, and lots of people are out pruning their trees and so on, and if you think if a tree is growing, and think of this as the baby's brain, if the tree's growing and all the branches are connecting and growing, and it's getting food and water on a predictable basis and everything it needs, and then it grows and develops into that whole tree. And imagine pruning off what doesn't get used. So we know that if those connections aren't stimulated through very basic things like being able to respond and understand what the baby needs, and the baby getting a consistent, predictable, safe response from their caregiver, helps keep those connections growing and thick and growing into that beautiful tree in the brain. And if they don't, what happens is those branches sort of die off. If they aren't used, then they don't grow and they never return back. So there's this incredible time with 1 million neurons being connected every second in an infant's brain. Imagine the opportunity there is for that brain to get what it needs in order to have a healthy foundation to build that house, because the brain is built from that bottom up. So those first few years are so critical for what happens later in our life and what our brain will look like.
The roots of growth, I guess, is another way to put it, right? And what direction the roots are going to take.
Right.
Mental health is a lot of, we say mental health, and then there's a lot of subcategories that go into that. And just from the conversations I've had so far in previous episodes, I'm learning quite a lot. But I would imagine that infant mental health is really unique compared to what we've already been talking about. Right.
It is. It's very unique, partly because of what we just talked about, Dave, around this unprecedented time of development and connections in our brain. And there's some great, if people want to go on, there's some great, if you Google infant brain, there are even some interactive sections that explain in not neurosurgeon terms. I'm not a neurosurgeon either, or a neuropsychologist, but you can go on that. And I think it helps us understand more what's going on inside that little brain. And it is powerful. It is a power engine of what's happening. So we know that another thing that's unique about this is that the infant's mental health is uniquely affected by how parents are doing. So the stresses that parents feel and the and their own mental health issues can sometimes affect how the baby will do. And this is not finger pointing or blaming at all. This is about parents wanting the best for their children and doing the best with what they have and what they can do. But when we know this about children, I think that there's a unique opportunity to look at what might we need in our life? What have we been through that might affect how our children, how we'll respond to our children? So there's this really unique opportunity without blame to say, if I know better, I can do something differently, because everyone wants to be a great parent to their child, and everybody wants their child. They want to build their child's brain. So this is really unique. I guess the other thing is in terms of the uniqueness of the mental health is that this is a time when sometimes the problems are invisible. They aren't easy to pick up always. So the more people know about it, those who care for children, childcare providers, early on educators, teachers, parents, physicians, the more we can watch for that and ask how the parent is doing as well. Because infant mental health is also unique in that we really see it as a pairing between their main attachment figure and the people that are key around them and themselves. So there's this dance, David, and it's we sometimes call it serve and return, but it's really a dance. Some of your viewers may have seen, remember there was a viral video of a dad sitting on the couch with a very young little boy. I think he was under 1, and the dad was all animated talking about the TV show and what was happening on the TV show. It had millions and millions of views, and then the infant just would copy it with the gesture, not even having the language yet, but his gestures and his facial expressions, and were all matching his dad's. And then he would wait, and then his dad would do something, and then he would copy it or do something similar. That's that give and take dance. I do something, you do something, I respond, you respond, and we're in sync. That is actually a fantastic example of building a baby's brain. I respond to you, you respond to me. Babies must have that for their brains to develop in order to develop those social emotional skills that are needed later in life.
Yeah, I guess copycat mode, right?
Yeah, like copycat and like watching for the nuances, I would add. So it's kind of like, when you're playing tennis and someone serves the ball over the net to you, and you can't always shoot back the same way. You got to gauge where the ball was going, how they turned the tennis racket, that kind of thing, right? You shoot it back and hopefully get it over the net. So let's imagine we're talking about an infant. So the infant serves something, they start crying and getting upset. The parent tries to figure out, what is that? Diaper, hurt, hungry, what is that? and they serve back, and it's like, nope, wasn't the diaper, so they hit the net, and it's like, you do it again, because the infant needs to keep sending out the cues, and we need to keep returning to try and find the response that matches what their need is. And as they learn from us that we are trying to do that, and that they can count on us to figure it out, even when it's hard to figure out sometimes. So I think it's that always an adjustment, back and forth. Sometimes, like I said, called a dance. I move this way, you move this way. But really, it gets down as much to not just interpreting, but also responding in a consistent, loving, caring way, even when it may be hard to do that.
Right. You mean parenting's not easy?
No manual.
Yeah, no manual. Well,
No.
and that being said, like, we talk about the uniqueness of mental health in infants. But how common is mental health issues in very young children? Is it very regular, or?
Yeah. So sometimes when I'm presenting to people, I'll ask, for anyone who's brave, I'll say, I'll just say, can anybody just take a guess at how frequent it is? Do you think it's more frequent or less frequent than in older children? And the surprising answer is that we believe that it's almost the same, very much the same. So we're looking at around 15 to 20%, about 1 in 5 kids. And when we've talked a fair amount about infants, but if we look at kids that are 2, 3, 4, going into, say, junior kindergarten, these, it's a little bit easier for parents to pick up, and others to pick up what's going on with children once it gets to be behavior. But I mean, we're going to talk about that in a moment, I think. But children they often don't have the language to be able to express what their needs are. When we have a youth come into our organization, generally they can express a lot about what's been going on. And even when children have language, it's still limited, and their language for emotional vocabulary, words for emotions, is limited. So we rely on the caregiver-child relationship to help us understand what might be going on for that youngster. Parent knows the child best. We know infant mental health and development, and then together we can figure that out. So that's it's one of those areas of mental health that has exploded, really, quite frankly, David, in the last, I would say even in the last 5 years, because of neuroscience and information about the brain that I mentioned earlier.
Right. Well, we're going to take a little bit of a break. We've got a short video that we're going to show here to give some insight on some of the things that we can do. We'll take a look at this, and then we'll be back and talk more with Virginia. Take a look.
We all want the best for our children. And sometimes there are things they do or ways they behave that we don't understand. Little kids have big feelings, and sometimes it's more than they can manage. From newborn to 6 years old, if you are concerned about your child, we are here to offer extra support and guidance. There is no problem too small, no child too young. Just call one of our friendly staff to set up an appointment. You are not alone. All are welcome. We are here to listen and help.
A very simple message there, Virginia, but an important one. And I like how it's put in there that no problem is too small. One of the things that I've discovered over all these episodes of the Mental Health Show is that the encouragement to reach out and not be ashamed, or we've been saying, stomp the stigma towards mental health. And, oh, well, that's not me, or, well, that's just a little problem. I don't want to bother anybody. But really, and this is kind of related to what you're talking about, the roots in the beginning, in the infancy of the problem, if you would paraphrase. Let's deal with it in the early stages so that it doesn't become something larger, right?
Right. And I think that that video kind of shows you it's like no child too small, no problem too big, is because you're hitting it on the nail on the head really there around. Partly people think, parents may think, I should be able to handle this. This is only a 4-year-old. This is only a 3-year-old.
Yeah. What kind of a parent am I that I can't handle this?
How horrible of a parent am I? You know, right? I have to go to a mental health. And then you add what we talked about at the beginning, where you said, wow, I didn't even know this was a topic. Of course, it's just understanding that when we're thinking about, or I would say infant and early years mental health, we're thinking about the social and emotional building blocks for children learning how to cope in society and how to manage. And Tina will be talking about resilience. This is the very beginnings of resilience happening. That tennis match I talked about, or the dance, the serve and return, that's the beginnings of regulation. An infant is born with the capacity to regulate how they're feeling and their emotions and to settle, but they will not, it has to grow and it has to develop, and it will only grow and develop within the context of a caring, responsive, consistent relationship.
Right. Now, that being said, so we talk about parenting isn't easy, and recognizing, what that behavior means. What kinds of behaviors might signal the mental health issues in young children that we need to recognize?
Right. So it's kind of what are you looking for? What do you know? So the first thing we talked about just a moment ago was, first of all, being open to recognizing that, it's not the end of the earth at all. It's better to recognize these things and get help early. But what those things might look like, it varies depending on the age of the child. In very young children, it sometimes comes up as, we often see it coming up in terms of the everyday living kinds of activities of extremely fussy child, really hard to settle. Children that have difficulties with basic functions in their body, feeding, where it's not related to some kind of developmental outcome of birth. So calming themselves, sleeping is often one. How they nurse or eat is another one. And whether or not they turn to a caregiver when they need someone. So kids who haven't learned that their caregiver will support them and meet their needs will often have something happen, a train goes by or something like that that's really loud, and they won't turn to that caregiver. So there's some things like that can happen. As kids get a little bit older, families that were, when we did a Sarnia Speaks at the library a year or two ago, some of our families that were courageous enough to share their stories talked about their kids. It showed in behavior. It showed in really, really clingy behavior beyond what you might expect for the age of their child. Heightened anxieties and fears that that the parents didn't know how to deal with because they seemed above and beyond what seemed to be reasonable for most parents to help children feel calm. It can come out as disruptive behavior, angry behavior, hurting behavior, running out of the junior kindergarten classroom or out of the childcare classroom. That's a fight or flight reaction sometimes, and we need to look at that. So I think that's why in the as we go forward, I think it's really important to see that as communication. So for young kids, we look at their behavior as a way of communicating their needs. And I think you have a video, maybe we could show that video and talk about it for a moment or two after, that describes that, maybe looking at it a different way about what behavior is trying to tell you.
Okay, let's take a look at that a few minutes here, and then we'll come back and talk some. Thanks, Virginia.
Thank you.
As parents, we've all asked these kinds of questions. How can I stop my child behaving like this? What do I do to manage her behavior? Is there something wrong with him? Why would she behave like this just to get attention? But what if the problem lies in the question? If instead we ask, how can I improve my relationship with my child? and what is her behavior telling me, we start to see that the need for attention is actually a need for connection. A child's behavior is in fact a form of communication, and it is driven by this need for an emotional connection. Children need emotional connection with their parent as a secure base to go and explore the world, and they need it to be a safe haven to come back to when things get too difficult. It's possible to control your child's behavior by threats, rules, and rewards, but stickers, treats, and time out lose their effectiveness eventually. The thing that really changes them is your presence and unconditional love. The bottom line is, they are more likely to behave well when they're feeling secure in their emotional connectedness and safe in our love. Love isn't just a warm, fluffy feeling, and it certainly doesn't mean giving in to them. Far from it. Your children need you to be bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind, so you can both set limits and take the time to understand your child's emotional world and respond to it, helping them make sense of their mess and confusion. We know this isn't straightforward. That's why with Circle of Security Parenting, we try to support parents in this way of relating to their children, from newborns to teenagers and beyond. In fact, we're seeing remarkable effects when this way of thinking is applied to other important relationships as well. Whatever the question, learning to be connected is a big part of the answer.
All right. Well, welcome back. And if you're just jumping in and joining us, we're talking about infant mental health. Yes, that's a topic, maybe one that we don't talk often enough about. And Virginia, who is the director, one of the directors for St. Clair Child Youth Services, joining us here to talk about. You talk about, just before we showed that video, Virginia, that, we as parents are trying to figure it out. But a little underlying in that, it's the child's trying to figure out what their emotion means at the same time, right? Why am I feeling this way? And what does this mean, right? So that sort of leads into my next question is what kind of reasons then do families refer their young children to St. Clair Child Youth Services?
Right. So, yeah, it's an important question, because I think if people, parents and grandparents that are parenting children, and other caregivers, if they realize kind of why do other families come in here, it may help twig ideas about why it might be okay for them too and not so scary. So I would say the kinds of reasons range. Some of them we've talked about, but the most common ones right now are anxieties in their child. They're noticing fears and anxieties in their child that worry them and that sometimes are interfering in just normal family activities, or in their daily life in one way or the other. Behavior is a big piece of it. So sometimes it'll be, aggressive behaviors. I would say we will hear about aggressive behaviors. We'll hear about withdrawing behaviors. A little bit less common to hear about that, because kids, just like with youth, when they're withdrawing and quiet, sometimes it doesn't get noticed as much, but it's just as much of a problem when those things are staying internal as when they're acting them out. We also see referrals from parents who say, I'm not sure what's going on, but my child's changed in the last little bit. I've never seen this from him. And now all of a sudden he seems to get angry at the drop of a hat and we can't calm him down. And he has long temper tantrums and he's 5 or 4, and so unusual changes in behavior would be another. And I would say the other thing, a fourth thing would be, and when I sort of generalize to the top ones, it would be also with parents who feel like they're kind of somehow or other they're out of sync with their child, like the child isn't responding to them well and seems to be defiant and pushing them back, and there's just that, that there's something going on between the connection between them that is not working in a way that's healthy for their family. And they want to figure that out, and they want to understand why their child's doing that. So you saw in that clip, that we're trying to sort of flip the question from why did he do that to questions about what is that behavior telling me, his or her behavior telling me, what is that behavior, whether it is an inconsolable toddler that goes way beyond being able to console themselves and maybe bangs their head on the floor, and it goes on for a long time, to a child who is expressing fear through being really angry. So there's a whole range there, but we want to sort of switch that question to why. Instead of why is it happening, is how can I understand what's going on, and what is my child thinking? What is my child feeling, and what are they trying to tell me? So getting curious is really important.
At the end of the day, I guess as parents, we're trying to figure it out,
Yeah.
and especially now in the information world that we live in, especially right now that we're forced to be in a virtual world. And there's all this information, and there's all these different topics on mental health, and I think probably a lot of people rely on Google for their information, but then I get overwhelmed, and then I finally get to the point of going, okay, I don't have a clue, or I need help, or whatever that is. So I finally made the decision. I'm going to reach out to St. Clair Child and Youth Services. What can parents expect from reaching out?
Yeah, it's really important for families to know that. So you're absolutely right that it takes courage for some families, just feel so desperate they call and they're okay with it. But others, it's taken a lot of courage and swallowing some pride and, pushing down some barriers of myths and so on. So what they can expect is actually we've kept it as simple as possible, even during these COVID times. A parent with a youngster under 6 can call in to our number, 519-337-3701. I know you'll have those numbers later. And they will be connected with our intake team. And right now we are offering a session quite immediately to parents. They'll be connected with one of our mental health counselors that specializes in 0 to 6 very quickly. Sometimes I think a call came in very late yesterday afternoon, and they're having a session this morning. So it can be very, very, very immediate. It's not, people sometimes think there are long wait lists. There are not. These are very young children.
Sorry, just tell everybody the number once again.
519-337-3701.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and it's as simple as saying that you want to see someone about your child that's 3 or 2 or 5, and then we'll take care of it from there. Our intake workers are top notch, and they will connect you, the parents, with or caregivers with a mental health counselor. And right now, David, we're continuing to work as virtual as possible, and we're finding that everyone's getting a bit more used to having a meeting over a video means through their computer. So we start with that. It can be a telephone call. It can be a video call through one of our platforms called Doxy. It's very simple to do. Families have been giving us good feedback about it, but it's really up to you, as the person who refers, if you would rather have a phone call or whether you'd rather do a video session. And then we just take it from there. We start with that first session, and we talk with the parent about what's been going on, what's brought them there, and then figure it out from there, whether maybe that's all that was needed was, the one conversation with some new information, new perspective, and the chance to talk to somebody about it. And then others will go on to further services. And that clip that you showed with Circle of Security is one of our very popular programs, because although there is no manual for how to parent our children, our Circle of Security program that we run, or the workshop that shares some of the basic concepts, many parents have told us over many years now that that has really helped them understand when they flip the question to try and understand what was the child trying to tell them and try to understand those cues, that made a really big difference. So yeah, so I would say, really simple to refer. They'll ask some very basic information about what brought you to refer. And then we'll pair you up with one of the counselors who will get in touch with you to set up a time. If you need a certain time, because of COVID, if you need a certain time when you have someone else who can look after children, or when they're napping, so that it's a private conversation, that can all be worked out. So it can be, it's all meant to be as responsive to what the parent needs and wants as possible.
All right, very good. Well, we'll continue to share the information on how you can reach out to St. Clair Child and Youth Services as well. We've got a couple more minutes here with you, Virginia, and then we're going to move on to Tina and talk about emotion regulation. Stay tuned for that coming up in a few minutes here, folks. Obviously, St. Clair Child and Youth Services is a great way to get the support. Lots of services which are free, and so don't let the financial possible barriers stop you from reaching out as well. But before St. Clair Child and Youth Services gets in the loop of helping out, how can parents, what can they do? What's the best way to support their infant child's mental health?
Okay, so a couple of things I would say come top of mind. So it's a daunting world, especially a parent with a brand new infant and their first one, for instance, or their first young children. There's so much they can do. If you go back to what I said earlier about this amazing opportunity in your child's brain, all this activity is happening. And it doesn't have to be pressure. Oh my God, I've got to have this child. My goodness, we've got to have this child stimulated. It's not about that. What they need most is you. So what I would say is how they can best support their infant child and child's mental health needs is to be curious about what their behavior and their messaging is trying to tell you. And when you get curious about it, you start taking the perspective of the infant, right? What might be going on here? What might be they be trying to tell me? What might my 4-year-old be trying to tell me? What might he need right now when he's seeming so angry? Is he stressed out about something? Has something been going on? So it gets you curious. Being there for your child, being there even through the tough times when they have meltdowns and difficult behavior, that can be so challenging for parents to get through. But if you always stay on your child's side in terms of understanding that if they could behave in the way that you wanted them to, they would, but something's going on for them that they can't, and they need you. So remembering that you are as a parent, you are their person. You are their person, and they're counting on you to stay on their side and to try to understand what they're trying to message to you. There's a I don't know if you remember I'm going to go back to, what was it, Inside Out, the Disney movie that came out about feelings and so on. There's an episode that some people who are watching it might remember about core memories. So parents can support those early and core memories. They're the building blocks to the later development in terms of experience, by making sure that as much as they can, and it's not possible to do it all the time, as much as they can to be able to respond in a consistent, caring way, so that their infant knows when they signal help, or when their child signals in some way that might be hard to understand that they need help, that they know you'll be there for them no matter what. And that's really, really so important. Really so important. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of great information here. And thanks so much for sharing all this today. And a replay will be available as well, folks. So if you didn't catch all this right away, or you want to come back to it again, you'll be able to do that. One more quick question. What's the one thing? What's the one takeaway? If you could tell a new parent one thing about infant mental health, what would that be?
I would tell them to think about it as the most amazing opportunity in their child's life. And I would tell them that the one thing that you can do is delight in your child. Ask yourself, do your eyes light up when you see your child? Because when you are delighting in your child, the rest you will figure out. You don't have to remember tons and tons of information. It's like, do your eyes light up when you see your child? And when your eyes light up when you see your child, and this carries right through all the ages and the conversations you've had with Liz and Scott and Emily and so on as well. The question is, do your eyes light up when you see that child? And when they do, you do get curious and you do follow some of your instincts, and you will figure it out. And that there is just no such thing as a perfect parent. And doing this work, I can tell you that all of us that do this work, that have children, have felt the weight of even knowing this information. Doesn't mean we get it right all the time. So look after yourself so you can look after your child.
Very good. Virginia, a lot of great information. Thank you so much for your time here today. And it's just been very informative. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Virginia Allan, she is one of the directors at St. Clair Child Youth Services. And as I said, a lot of great information on infant mental health. This video is going to be staying up on all our social medias, on our YouTube channel, wherever you're watching from. So you can come back to it and reference anytime. If you haven't seen any of the other episodes, they're all there as well on our YouTube channel. So be sure to check that out. Okay, well, we're going to bring Tina Mcintosh back. She is a children's mental health counselor. Welcome back, Tina.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. We're going to talk. This is a topic I've never really heard of before: emotion regulation. Let's start with just exactly what is that?
Yeah, it's kind of big words that we don't use every day. More so, I guess, book words, I would call them. Often we would say, I think, out there, stuff like, I can't control my emotions, or those kids can't control their emotions, kind of in that reference, not so formal. But if we just kind of consider the fact that we all have lots of emotions throughout our day, we probably don't notice how many emotions we go through in our day, but we usually flow through them pretty quickly. And all those emotions have urges, and some they change how we physically feel, and they come with urges that sometimes result in behavior that is impulsive and that we later regret, and we feel like that emotion's kind of out of control, I guess. So emotion regulation is really about using skills so that we're more in control of our behavior that when we're experiencing emotions. And I know that you had that one slide up. When sometimes we talk to people, I know that right there with emotion regulation, it is being brought into schools, being talked about, where those signs, so that's called the zones of regulation. So sometimes parents have heard that language, or children have heard it a little bit at school. And then I always just put the inside out characters in some of the slides that I talk to kids about, because they're relatable, and it's a fairly popular movie for people to watch. Yeah.
When we're talking about emotion regulation, does this look differently depending on the age group, or is it the same all the way across?
Yes, I think it's important to recognize that learning emotion regulation goes throughout our development, throughout our life. So when Virginia was talking, she was talking about infancy. And so when a baby's crying and they're upset and a parent goes to address that, that's called co-regulation. And it's actually, co-regulation is really important throughout life. We tend to have a dance of co-regulation in lots of, throughout our life into our adult years and our relationships. However, as we continue to grow, things like, say, temper tantrums, throwing big fits, like this really big dysregulation is not so acceptable, and people aren't going to necessarily meet those needs. And so we are needing to develop some self-management, self-regulation to manage those emotions. And so naturally, as kids begin to grow, we start to build some of this in by first they starting to label different emotions, so being able to recognize them, such as inside out, and kids seeing that, and oh, there's joy and there's anger, and they start to kind of label that. The other thing is, then next step, people need to recognize their own emotions inside themselves. Like, how do they know that they're feeling those joy or anger, and how do they know when other people are feeling those feelings? So that's a skill to start to develop, that recognition of what you're feeling. And then after that, we start to figure out, well, what do I want to do when those emotions come up? And so that's part of that continuum and that development through life, and is expected. We wouldn't expect a young child to know exactly what to do. But hopefully, as people get older, they have a little bit more tools in their toolbox that to know, when anger gets coming at me, this is how I'm going to handle that. Or if sadness is coming at me, this is how I'm going to handle that.
Right. Now, you talk emotions, right? And boy, there's a whole topic. We could do just a whole show just on that. But everybody handles that a little bit differently. Some of us are very open to talk about our emotions, and then other people find it a little harder to talk about those emotions. Why is it hard for others to sometimes talk about their emotions?
Yeah, I find this quite often, that people have a hard time talking about emotions, especially certain emotions, because in our society, we have a tendency to place judgment and labels on things, and emotions aren't anything different from that. So a lot of times people will, kind of refer to good emotion, bad emotion, or this is a positive emotion, this is a negative emotion, giving this kind of label or concept. And so if people are feeling certain emotions, that can even lead to other emotions such as shame or embarrassment, that they're even having these emotions.
Right.
So I feel one of the important conversations that I have with people is just building a healthy perspective on emotions instead of these labels. So that first off, emotions aren't good or bad. They just are. In fact, they're part of us. They're natural. They're built into us. So emotions are kind of a signal that our brain releases based on perceptions. I have a tendency to talk with my hands, I notice. Okay, very good. So they're signals that our brains release based on our perception. Whether our perception is accurate or not, that doesn't matter. Our perception sends out a signal from our brain and creates changes in our bodies. We have physical sensation changes where we notice that, and that's why that term feelings come up. And those signals are there because they have a function. Historically, going back in time, emotions were there as a function built into us for survival, to thrive, to drive, motivation, for relationships. Like, they all serve a really important function in our life. So what's really important is for people to understand that emotions have a function. Maybe the urges that we're having might mismatch sometimes those situations based on a perception or different things kind of going on, but the emotion's not bad. It's there. And the more we're able to understand what's more about the emotion, it actually gives us more power and control over the emotion. So we just have to be able to look at that so that we're able to understand that alarm system and be able to know what to do with that.
I like how you put that alarm system. Interesting. Let's talk about anger. And this is one that it's okay to be angry, right? But it's really more about how we're angry. Is that fair to say? And why do some children have more anger outbursts than some others?
I think that's perfectly fair to say. So anger, I think, is one of the more challenging topics to sometimes bring up with other people because of the natural probably the natural purpose of anger is for protection, right? So people will go on some defense. But it's a really great and interesting emotion to talk about. A lot of times people feel like anger comes out of nowhere. They have perceptions that it's intentional and malicious or on purpose. These perceptions are very, very few for the amount of anger outbursts there are. Most often, people's anger is what we would call reactive anger. So reactive anger is a result of a combination of, say, emotions, frustrations, annoyances, disappointments, along with other stressors that build pressure in us that lead us to eventually kind of have those blow ups, those fits, those temper tantrums in our life. At St. Clair Child Youth Services, we often try to go through this illustration through using a beaker metaphor. So I know that there's a beaker. I actually did one that I thought might be relevant.
Actually.
What's that?
I'm excited for this.
Okay. I thought, why not do one that's kind of even relevant to like COVID-19 right now? Because I've been talking to lots of people, and there's been lots of different things that I would say could be beaker fillers. So say, for instance, you start the whole thing. Actually, I think a lot of people felt some empty at first, like, oh, I have a few days off. And then when reality started to hit, there's no routine, starting to get tired. There's worries like, how long is this going to be? What am I expecting down the line? There's changes, losses, like, oh, I can't see this person. What do you mean? And I have to do things this way now. How am I going to manage that? Say if those were just the only things that are sitting there in a person's beaker, they might kind of manage. They would probably start to feel some feelings of tension, stress in their body. But if you continue to add, like work, I know I've heard a lot of people talk about confusion around school, work, and the doability about all that. Even, like going to go do things, and it's taking a lot longer. Like I can't just go and grab a few things from the grocery store. It's taking forever to get. All these things, if you might have these, not much more, but say you come home and you're like, man, all I want is, I like using something light at the end, but all I want is that drumstick that's in my freezer, and you come home and the drumstick's gone. What's going to happen? You can make it go. Like KABOOM, right? And so I hear from parents a lot like, wow, like I did not even see that happening over, something like that. It was simple. Yesterday they would have been able to handle that problem. Today, for some reason, it blew them up. And so I don't know, there's no patterns, there's no real understanding of where these outbursts are coming from, or these fits or tantrums. So this helps to give a little bit more understanding of that. That in fact, we all have, I think there's another slide like on kind of that beaker mantra. That if we were to look at the beaker, everyone has one. We all have a same capacity like there. That everybody's frustration beaker is the same size. So we all have a limit, it's all the same size, and we all actually react poorly when it's overflowing. Okay. So that means maybe it doesn't look all the same, but it usually means we all might say things we might not mean, we might do things we might not mean when our beaker overflows.
Well, so I understand when you say everyone's frustration beaker is the same size, that surprises me, because I mean, I'm used to hearing like, well, he's got a shorter fuse, like dad has a shorter fuse than mom, but you're saying everybody's the same beaker size.
So I'm going to go with this. Yes, this that I actually do believe that everybody has the same beaker size.
Okay.
There is a difference why some people's beakers overflow more, and that's because some people have more things that are constantly filling their beaker, that they actually have more beaker fillers. So you're right, they might be sitting half full all the time because of those beaker fillers. So there would be less space in a beaker. Does that make us bad people if we have these beaker fillers? This is what I always go through with kids, and they say no. But does that mean we get to do whatever we want, right? And no, because, well, who really wants their beakers to overflow? No one likes it.
No.
Everyone tries to prevent it. Where this some of this language came from is from a program down at CPRI called the Break Shop program. And Dr. Duncan McKinley, he would use this more metaphor. He'd say, it's kind of like barfing. Like, no one wants to do it. Everyone tries to prevent it. And when it does happen, it makes a huge mess.
Right. Okay. Good example. Good example.
So it's really about, when we look at it, we learn some more control. Children do, adults, when we start to recognize what are those beaker fillers in our lives, recognizing how to catch your beaker before it overflows, so that you can do things before it overflows to start to empty it, so that you're not having those big kabooms as much.
Well, let's talk about those beaker fillers a little bit more in depth on what you mean by some people have more beaker fillers than others.
Yeah, so that would be great. So typically with people, you would say for the most part, everyone has some common beaker fillers. Those would be things like, feelings, certain emotions, so frustration, annoyances, even excitement. Can really fill people's beakers. So say if you were planning a trip this summer, that could be a positive thing, but that for a lot of people has some beaker fillers because they got a plan, they've got trips, there's some things that they don't know. So those kind of things are maybe common beaker fillers, or stressors like tests, moves, illness, loss. But would a lot of the children and youth that we meet, and even adults, there's things that they go through their day not really recognizing that those things fill their beaker as well. And so if I was to take a kid, for instance, who may struggle with ADHD, the idea of them sitting and paying attention for a long period of time, so in a classroom setting, can be a real challenge, and that can be causing some of that beaker to fill, or just having too much energy to be able to settle down before bed and to, quiet yourself. That can be a beaker filler. You see there like too many sensitivities. So some children, noises, like even adults actually, it's all the lawn mowing that goes on in the summertime, sometimes really close my beaker, right? So noises, heat, temperature, like light, busyness. I hear that a lot, like just crowds and bumping in, like that kind of thing. Thoughts. So when people worry over and over again, feel like kind of stuck, it needs to be perfect, or having a hard time transitioning. I'm not quite done here yet. Now I've got to go here. So worries. All this kind of stuff can also be additional beaker fillers depending on a person, and those it's important to recognize that, because if those aren't identified and they're kind of ignored, like, well, other kids can do this, why can't you, or minimized that way, it just creates more frustration. So if we're able to identify those things for people, then hopefully it opens opportunity to see if there's other things we can do to manage that and decrease those frustrations so that they're not constantly sitting there. Yeah, or else they go
Right. Avoid the kaboom at the end there.
Yeah, kaboom. Yeah, so
You were starting to talk about, this is really interesting. I like how you put the visual up here to explain this. It really helps a lot. But we have to manage all of this, right? We have to recognize, I guess, when these feelings come about, and how do we keep our beaker from kabooming? What can we do to manage all of this?
right. Sorry, I gotta clear my throat there.
That's
So
okay.
the first thing that I always talk to people about is recognizing those early warning signs. So
Yeah.
we often are very familiar about what it looks like when a person is calm, relaxed, chilled, or we are very familiar when somebody is at a point where they're going to blow up or have blown up, and we see that kind of situation. Early warning signs are really recognizing that we're leading up to something. And those are important to pay attention to. I'd say some of the ones that are most common, ones that I hear about or I see even with kids in at St. Clair Child Youth Services would be like getting quiet, making less eye contact, or getting loud and starting to play roughly. Could be a different, more energized. They might have tense muscles. We might see them start to tensen up, kind of thing.
Right.
I like this one, like sigh of disgust. In like the Inside Out movie, there's a sigh of disgust, kind of eye roll. You see that a lot with teenagers. Those kind of signs are important for the person who is experiencing the feeling to start to recognize, so that they can identify what emotion and feeling they're having, but also for other people to recognize, as we do help and support people through emotions, through things. Really, in that point, yeah, I think you pulled up that one slide that showed some of those like early warning signs. I think if you hit it again, there's a few more pictures that show up.
Oh, yeah.
So yelling and some anger and crying sometimes. And we might ignore these, and we might even try to continue to push the triggers, like, but you have to do this right now, and this is really important. And it's really important for everyone to know that if their beaker's starting to fill and those triggers are still there or being pushed in an unsafe way, that's where the explosion will end up going, because that's just going to continue to fill that beaker up. So recognizing these early warning signs for kids and for adults can help to first look at, and you, kind of what I like to talk about is a teacher. It's really, people can come up with different names for it, and I think there's a picture that you, the next slide that you had up there for a second, that had some rooms, little spaces, but a teacher is really like just recognizing before it's too late, I need to do something to empty my beaker. I need to take some of this stress. I know I'm feeling stress, tension going on in my body, and I need to do something to alleviate some of that and empty some of that out. So historically, back conventional ways, people would be like, you're to your room, you're grounded, all this kind of stuff. And maybe if your beaker overflows and you were saying things and doing things really inappropriate, you would be. But when your beaker's just filling, if you're catching that kind of early, there should be permission for people to have safety away from the triggers. So that might be having a little spot that so I like some of these pictures, they've done like a cozy cove. It could be close to a parent if they like being close to a parent, but it's doing activities. It might be drawing, it could be playing with putty, stuff that helps to empty some of their beaker. It's meant to not be a punishment. It's meant for them to be able to say, okay, I need to do something for myself right now to settle that down. We as adults have been doing that forever. Like I use beaker all the time too. If my beaker's overflowing, I might go for a walk. I might go step outside, get some fresh air. I might, talk to a friend. It's not a punishment, right? It's a way of regulating what's going on inside us. And I think we need to encourage that and see it as a skill when kids are also doing that. How can they do that? And then when they start to feel a little bit, they're not so full, then it's important to talk to them a little bit more with problem solving. Sometimes though, when a person's beaker is filling, they just need to be heard and validated in a situation. They just to know that just to have their emotion recognized and to be able to be heard in order for themselves to sometimes move into new ideas, new perspectives, or solutions to a problem.
When you talk about validating, Tina, when I validate that emotion, does that mean I'm agreeing with that feeling?
Right. So sometimes with parents, I know that this can seem strange. If I'm validating, am I agreeing with the emotion? And validation might sound like that you're doing that, but it actually isn't. It's just actually, let's see. It isn't about agreeing or disagreeing. It's about communicating that you accept that that's where they're at. You accept their thoughts and their feelings. So it's more, I'm not saying, so we have a tendency to judge emotions. That might sound like you shouldn't be upset, or I shouldn't be upset. We might judge our own emotions. And validation isn't, pardon?
You're being too sensitive.
Yeah.
You're getting upset, or you're getting angry over nothing, right?
Right, that kind of thing. And so that doesn't help. Usually that if somebody hears that, it actually elevates their own stress and beaker levels, right? So validation is just about taking that judgment away, and it's just accepting that the emotion is there, that it did come up. And so it can sound like it can look like just listening without judging the emotion. It can look like reflecting, so saying something along the line like, you're angry. I hear you're angry. Like, sounds like you're angry. Any way that kind of feels natural. Sometimes it's guessing to help a person figure out what they're thinking, and they'll correct you if you're wrong. And definitely if it's a normal reaction for someone to be angry, say, or upset or sad about, normalizing it for the kid is good. So validation is huge, and that is where co-regulation is still very important through our lives, because we often need to have people to talk to and help us sort through our emotions as well.
Yeah. Now we get these emotions, and we're validating, we're recognizing, we're trying to deal with it all. What kind of things can we do to, I guess, relax or practice to make us more strong, so we don't get the kaboom at the end of the beaker?
Right. So over the pandemic, there's been some consistent workshops that I've been watching around just coping and managing, and it's all very much on some basics. And I think it's important just to remember the power of basic things for making ourselves emotionally strong. If we were to think about, if I skip a meal, I'm might get hangry, and if I'm overtired, I get kind of grumpy, and if I'm stuck in the house and not exercising or doing any kind of activity, I start to get feeling kind of mopey and down, and so we need to recognize that our emotional health is something that we need to prioritize on a routine basis to make us stronger. The more we have certain things, but when COVID happened, it threw this big curveball where all our routines and patterns and stuff got quite thrown off.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
I think it affected people a lot. So when we're looking at making ourselves stronger, because if we don't do these things, we feel more emotionally vulnerable. If we're going to do that, it is about, you can just simply look at what we have in control over. We have control over, having how to build better night's sleep the best we can. We might have control over building in some activities so that we can stress relief. We have control over, doing certain exercises. So you're putting up a slide that has some different relaxation things. So we might be able to, stretches, be able to kind of just self-care, eat properly. These things here, breathing exercises, my special place. They're just exercises. There's lots of YouTube videos, and there's apps. There's even books that you can get even for younger children that will help to build in this, and learning these kind of strategies like progressive muscle relaxation when you're not upset is important, because the more these kind of things are practiced when you're in just kind of normal setting, the more likely you're going to use them when you're needing them, because your emotions are starting to get going. So I know a few weeks ago, I think on the Mental Health Week, they talked a little bit about mindfulness. They did a little bit of deep breathing exercises. I know there's lots of YouTube videos. I'll get to some of that. Here's a lot of kids kind of like this one. It's a Stop in 5, and it's a focus on that mindfulness idea of 5 things you see, 4 things you hear. So you're looking around, trying to pay attention. So the 4 things you hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, 1 deep breath, and a good thing about yourself. I've heard teenagers liking this one. It's called a grounding technique because it forces your brain to stop thinking about what is upsetting itself in order to focus on something else. So it's giving your brain something to do.
a distraction, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's giving your brain something to do, and that's a very helpful strategy for some to find something along that line.
I like the deep breath. That's mine. Just like, okay, just take a deep breath. Let's just go to your corner for a minute. I'd say that to my kids. Okay, just take a deep breath. Go to your corner. Especially if it's parent versus child, I guess sometimes let's both take a deep breath. We both need to go to our corners, and then we'll come back out not fighting.
Right. Yeah. The deep breaths are so portable. You can take them anywhere, and when you learn how to do it, it's known to change your physical response. So when we talk about, your limbic system sending out all this stuff to create stress and tension, like to prepare for something, deep breathing is what we do when we're falling asleep. So if you can actually get your breath to do what it does when it feels relaxed, it will switch the signal system in your whole body and change it. So you get a chemical change in your body when you can figure it out. But sometimes it takes practice. This take 5 breathing is just another way of giving some focus. It's nice for kids. I find even depending, you could take a piece of paper. I don't think this quite shows, and you could trace your hand while doing the breath.
Okay.
And so it's kind of this idea of, you know, following your hand and breathing in as you follow up and tracing it down.
Ah.
And it just, I find giving something to do, because a lot of times people will say, well, deep breathing doesn't work, but it's because you breathe and think automatically all the time. So you're needing to kind of switch it so that you're actually not thinking about what's upsetting you, and you're focusing on your breath. So to do that, giving your brain a little something to focus on can be helpful for that short minute.
Now that
5 minutes.
being said, these are some great examples, Tina, and thanks for that. Actually, I'm going to take a couple of these home with me, because they're learning something new there. But there's good distractions. There's some bad. What about bad distractions though? Like, you know, sometimes we're angry and we're, okay, well, I'm going for a drive. Maybe that's not a good time to be going for a drive necessarily. Right? Or you know, it's okay to be angry, but maybe punching a wall isn't the way to handle that sort of. We probably want to focus on positive distractions.
So I think for people, it is important to know what your needs are. So if you are feeling a level of energy, probably when you're upset, you may need some kind of energizing Beaker emptier. Like when we looked at the list of kind of relaxation, there was exercising. I know for myself, I sometimes really need to go jogging, and a jog is really helpful, right? When we talk to children, there's a need for safety, right? So any kind of plans, what is going to be helpful needs to be discussed, as well as what's going to work for everybody in the home. And that's the same with school. So that they have ideas of what is acceptable. And for one house, it might be acceptable to do certain things, like where they might have like jump on a trampoline or like punch a punching bag. They may have some of those options. Another house is like, no way, like that's just not going to happen here. So those are all conversations. And one thing I didn't really touch on in it is, I did talk that it's good to get around to problem solving, but I didn't really touch on that. And so there is some links that I did put up for collaborative problem solving. And that is a way of starting to, you know, work together on solving some of those problems. So they can be added like just at the end or something like that. If people had more questions about that, they could come into the agency, get more information that way to better understand how that works in working with others to come up with some solutions. Emotion regulation is really a topic that is big and often takes quite a bit to cover. So knowing the time, probably won't get too much further on things, but I saw you pulled up the video, sorry about that, on the Beakers. So should I kind of lead into that for ending up for today?
We're getting ready to wrap up here, so we've got the video here, but go ahead and take us into that, and then I'll play it for everybody. Okay, so this video I really like. It's called Just Breathe. It's a YouTube video, so anyone can watch it at any point, and it's some children who are talking about just their own emotion regulation. They use in it this jar, and it is a jar. They put sprinkles in it and talk about how it's like their emotions kind of all going everywhere. So if you want to have a conversation with your kids at home, I think that this is a great way to watch a video together and then even do a craft. Kids love this craft where they put these sprinkles into a jar. They're able to shake it up and let it kind of settle down. So I hope you enjoy the video. It does give a little bit of a wraparound of the emotion regulation, some of the things we talked about today. Very good. Thanks, Tina. We're going to take a look at this, and then we'll come back to wrap up with both Tina and Virginia. Stay with us.
I get really mad when my brother hits me a lot.
I don't like it when you say you don't want to play with me.
When I'm mad, my brain can get a headache and it can start hurting.
Your blood keeps pumping because you're like really mad. And you start to get sweaty because you're getting really, really mad. And then when you start getting really mad, you turn red.
When your body can't really control yourself, mad just takes over your body.
I just get out of control. It's kind of like if you had a jar and then the jar would be your brain and then you put glitter in the jar and that would be how you would feel like. If you shook up the jar and the glitter went everywhere, that would be how your mind looks. And it's like spinning around and then you don't have any time to think. And you sometimes punch stuff and people when you don't really mean it.
When I get angry, I feel it in my heart.
I really don't like when I get angry. The amygdala really reacts, but the prefrontal cortex tries to keep it down. When I feel like I want to, get really angry and yell, I just sometimes, take deep breaths. First you find a place where you can be alone, then you find some way to relax and calm down.
When I need to calm down, I take deep breaths.
I breathe in through my nose. Sometimes I close my eyes or just take deep breaths.
It's calming down, it's not moving. It's slowing down and then it stops. And the heart pumps slow and then it goes into your brain.
It's like all the sparkles are at the bottom of your brain. My brain slows down and then I feel more calm and then I'm ready to speak to that person.
All right. Well, what a great demonstration of what we've been talking about here today. And Tina, thank you so much. And that was very informative. A new topic I'd never heard of, and we all learned some things there too. I know there's some great resources, Tina, that you want to share. We'll be posting these thinkkids.org and Lives in the Balance. What kind of things can we expect to see there when people visit those websites, Tina?
Sorry. So those particular links are connected with what's called collaborative problem solving, which is a parenting technique that was actually complements even the circle of security. It's really about how to move through with kids, be with kids with their emotions, and try to figure out stuff like what might be, for instance, filling their beakers, and what can we do to get to a point to empty them without them filling mommy and daddy's beakers too, or the teacher's beakers, right? How do we do that together in such a way that no one's beaker is getting full? And so there's lots of videos and stuff on those websites for people to get familiar with that approach. The other thing I do want to also just plug is the Bookkeeper in Town has been a wonderful resource for bringing in books, bringing in sometimes games and activities for people to have conversations with their children on emotions, on ways to relax. And so they're just a wonderful place that you could call, find out more about what resources they might have. And then the internet has a wide range of YouTube videos that are geared for kids for relaxation as well, the teenagers, and there's apps on people's phones. So I hear that often from parents where they might do stretching apps or they might do breathing apps, different things. So be creative on how to have these wonderful conversations with your families because emotions are normal. They're going to come up, and we're just all learning together how to manage them in a healthy way for ourselves, right?
Right. Tina, thanks again. Really appreciate that. And Virginia, both of you, very informative. And it's great that this is going to stay available, and people will be able to go through and learn it and piece by piece on their own time. So thank you again very much for being here, a part of the Mental Health Show. Thanks to all of you for watching. This is episode number 4. We'll be back again very soon next week with some more topics. And again, share your comments, ask your questions in the comments section on Facebook, or if you're watching on YouTube, and people will be following up. Our experts will take some time to do their best to answer your questions. And if you've got some topics that you'd like to hear about that we haven't covered here on the Mental Health Show, let us know. We'll be happy to do that. Thanks again, ladies. And myself, David Burrows, happy to be the host here once again. You've been watching another episode of the Mental Health Show. Until next time, take care. Bye for now.